2023. Croeso, I am Councillor Phil Rogers and I will be chairing this meeting. Please could you ensure that your phones are switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. In addition, when asked to raise your hand, if members who are virtually viewing this meeting could raise your electronic hand, and for members that are in the council chamber, just raise your hand. For the purpose of declarations, I would like to confirm that we'll be scrutinising item number 5 of the Cabinet Papers today. Now I'll move on to declarations, agenda item 2. Are there any declarations of interest?
I don't see any, Chair.
Thank you, Charlotte. We'll move on to agenda item 3, pre-decision scrutiny. And with this one, we will now move to the Cabinet agenda for pre-decision scrutiny. As previously mentioned, we have decided to scrutinise item number 5 on the Cabinet agenda. Item number 5, Celtic Free Ports. Officers, would you like to add anything additional to the report? Craig?
Chair, if I could just come in for a moment and just make a technical amendment for members. You'll note that recommendation E talks of the approval of the commitment of £250,000 revenue. Just to confirm that that figure should ultimately be 200,000, and there would need to be a corresponding amendment then in the MOU, obviously just to reflect that. So if I could just put that on record and it'll be recorded in the minutes. It has no impact on the way you would take the vote at the next stage, but it'll just be recorded appropriately for the minutes.
Thank you, Craig. Are there any other officers? Chief Executive Karen, please.
Thank you, Chair. And can I introduce David Gwynn as well, who's on the call this afternoon. You've met David before when we were talking to you at the bid stage. So David acted as our bid director over the months leading up to the submission of the application into the two governments. And David is working with us now to lead the process over the next couple of months up to the point where we submit the outline business case. So with your agreement, Chair, I'd like to just say something very briefly about where we are in the process, but I think it would be helpful for members of the Scrutiny Committee to have an understanding from David about what the work activities are going to be over the coming months. So you've got a bit more information than maybe you would be able to glean from the report. And I think that might be useful for you. So if you're comfortable with that, Chair, we'll proceed on that basis. So I can see people nodding, so I'll take that as a yes. So just very briefly, what the report is doing today is it's first of all formally reporting the successful application that we made for a free port covering the port of Talbot and the port of Milford Haven, because this is the first opportunity we've had to report it on a formal basis. But what I'm also seeking this afternoon then is authority to commit expenditure and undertake various activities that move us forward now to the next stage of the process. So in order to draw down the government investment that's attached to the free port policy, you'll have seen in the document that there are 2 business cases we've got to submit into government. The first one being an outline business case, which will build on what we put in the bid, but obviously provide more detail as to how we are proposing to implement and deliver those commitments that we made in the bid. And at that point in the process, it will unlock some of the benefits that are attached to the free port policy. So there's an intensive piece of work for us to do over the next 4 months, which is the timescale within which government expect us to submit the outline business case. And then it'll take the best part of 12 months from now to get to the full business case, which will then unlock the rest of the benefits of the free port policy. And that will include the £25 million worth of seed capital that the government have made available to support this particular initiative. So, as I say, we work into quite a demanding timescale. There's a lot of government funding going into the free port policy. So we will see Welsh Government, UK Government and the Treasury in particular looking at the proposals with a very critical eye, and they'll want to be satisfied that we are going to deliver the free port policy objectives, but also as well demonstrate best value for money as well. So there's a lot of detailed technical work that will need to be done over the forthcoming months. So I'm probably going to pause there, Chair, other than to say the detail of the work that I'll be undertaking with Nicola and the wider partners is detailed in the Memorandum of Understanding that you've got in front of you today. I'm deliberately limiting the authority I'm seeking today to the outline business case, because at the point of getting a yes from government on that, I'll be bringing another report back to you, explaining then what will need to happen to get us to the full business case, so that you can then sort of track the progress of that as the whole thing develops. So I'll pause there and ask David if he could come in just to give members a bit more detail of what will be involved in the next couple of months. And then if you don't mind, Chair, I'll just come back in on a couple of the points that he's going to refer to, just to really give members a bit more assurance about how we'll make sure that some of the things that I know you'll be particularly interested in, how you'll have visibility of those matters, you know, as we get to them.
Over to you, David. Croeso.
Hello, thank you. And my apologies, first of all, that despite having an extremely Welsh name, I'm actually from the West Midlands, so I struggle when we start to croeso. I know means welcome, so thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Throughout the bid process, I thought we had a very strong proposition based on the floating offshore wind and the ancillary benefits that flow from that proposal. And I think it's great that the government recognised that, and gratifying the quality of the feedback we received from the two governments in a feedback call a couple of weeks ago. But as Karen says, and I think as I probably told you at the bid stage, the bid document itself only goes so far. It can only, we were limited to 500 words on decarbonisation or 250 words on innovation. So we couldn't necessarily say what we wanted to be able to say, nor could we go into enough detail about how we wanted to do anything. So what we have to do now over the next phase is take some of those words and concepts that we've written in our bid document that have scored well. For example, the tax site delivery agreement mechanic, which will be the key control document between landowners and the proposed Freeport company. Rather than saying we will have a tax site delivery agreement that will support the objectives of the Freeport, we've got to get those agreed with landowners. Whilst we have negotiating power and negotiating strength with them, we have to set out what those terms mean. We have to make that agreement into one that can actually work and actually be implemented, and use it to mould and guide what we want as outcomes from a public policy perspective from this programme. Now, what that means is we'll have to front end and think about in detail about quite a lot of the difficult issues and difficult questions that arise when you're setting up a new entity, exactly how it is governed, who is represented on the board, how it will take decisions, how it will refer back to the democratic processes at the two councils. So although it sounds like write an OBC, it's quite a short and simple phrase. It underlies quite a lot of the detailed work that we have to do around the relationships between the parties, the economics that they get, the verification that what we're putting forward in the plan is what wants to happen, an initial idea of how we're going to use the 25 million seed capital Karen referred to, working closely with HM Treasury to show that the sites are in fact, under their word, underdeveloped and need this intervention in order to become developed. A lot of work to do around all of that. There's probably two key milestones that we need to think about in terms of benefits. Firstly, approval of the OBC will be the gateway for the drafting of a statutory instrument, which gives rise to what we call the national tax benefits that will be available to investors for occupying these sites and building new factories or whatever. The second thing will be the full business case, which follows on from the outline business case, which will go into a bit more detail. And that will take another period of time to develop once we have that OBC approved. There's also a separate parallel process we need to run through with HM Customs and Exercise to designate two of the sites as custom zones to get those benefits. That's a core element of the policy from the government's perspective, and we'll need to work through with site owners or potential customs zone operators the processes they need to go through to be able to secure that authorization. So we can say we are fully approved. At the point at which we are fully approved, business rates will be able to be retained. We'll need to work closely with the partners and the two councils about the investment policy and the ideas and the processes which will be gone through to be able to allocate that money in due course. And it will also release the £25 million of seed capital. There's probably a whole heap of other things that I can touch on. Underlying this is the process of setting up a company. If you're setting up a company, there's a lot of quite boring administration you're going to need to do. How does it account for itself? Have you got insurances in place? How do you employ people? You've got to find laptops, computers, all of the things you do in a business setup phase in parallel, alongside the quite, high level government policy stuff of, making sure we drive inward investment into the regions. So there's a lot of different work to do on a number of multiple fronts that also comes together in these two documents, the OBC and the FBC.
Thank you, David. Back to Karen then, please.
So David mentioned the need to establish a company that will run the Freeport on a day-to-day basis. So I think key appointments there for us will be the chief executive appointment and a permanent chair of the company. And I know members will have an interest in that. So we'll come back and we'll talk to you about how those appointments, the process that we would be proposing to put in place will operate. Likewise, we'll need to nominate someone to sit on the board. It'll probably be an officer appointment. So again, I know members will be interested in the detail of that, and we'll come back and we'll have further discussions about that when we get to that stage. So what those things will do then is give us some comfort about the way in which the company is going to behave, how it's going to operate, because ultimately what we want to see is well-paid, green, sustainable employment, where we've got those kind of key links with the trade unions and all those things that we said we would want to see as benefits of the policy. The other area that David mentioned is about the investment policy. So there will need to be a mechanism set up to decide how the £25 million worth of seed capital and the retained business rates will actually be spent. So that is likely to be a joint committee between ourselves and Pembrokeshire, but we have got a bit more advice we want to get on retained business rates and the options around that before we kind of come to a final view on that. But again, I think really important that members are in control of where the public money is going to be spent here and in Pembrokeshire. And that's based on investment propositions that you are, satisfied will help us to deliver, again, the outcomes that we've said we want to achieve through this initiative. So I just wanted to mention those at the end here, because as we go through this process, although you've given me authority to progress these things within the partnership, I think these are quite important issues. I'll want to come back probably with some monitoring reports or information updates for you, so you can see how those things are progressing. So you've got full information and full visibility about it before we then hopefully get to the OBC point. And then there's another plan I'll need to be bringing forward at that stage. So that's all I wanted to come back and just give a little bit of further assurance to members. We want to make sure this is open and transparent, and you get to see some of this detail as it develops.
Thank you, Karen and David. Thank you both very much. We'll go to questions now. Members have questions. I've one in the book at the moment. Councillor Carol Clement Williams, please.
Thank you, Chair. The question I had was around the finance, as you would have thought. The financial risks estimated to be £150,000 to £250,000. When the budget came around, we were told that you needed to keep that money in reserves. So will this money, I know the monies are intended to be recouped from the Freeport company, but if there was worries about the reserves last year, does this mean that they'll be recouped before the budget next year? Because we all know how tight money is in the council at the moment, and all councils in the round. So a question around that, please. And Karen's just touched on it. I'm sure there'll be more opportunity to comment on the board of the other company and the governance of it. In my experience now as a councillor, I've seen 2 companies set up that were kind of separate from the council, but we were told that there would still be input from the council, and I never really saw that input once those companies were set up. So I'll be asking. No, I don't need answers to those today, but those would be the kind of things that I would want to see in the report, Karen, moving forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Clement-Williams. We'll bring Karen back in, please.
I'll just come back, Councillor Clement-Williams, on the governance point, and then I'll ask Hugh to just touch on the financial risk point as well. I think in terms of setting up the investment panel, investment committee, whatever we describe it as, you've got an opportunity there to think about how you'd want to scrutinise the decisions going through that company. And also before it's established as well, to look at the terms of reference that we would be looking to set up. So I think there's plenty of opportunity there, just to give you a bit of comfort on the investment side of it. The company performance then, what I would say is within the Constitution, and Craig will correct me now if I'm saying something that's not right, when you make appointments to outside bodies, you have the right to call those representatives of the council to give account of what is happening. So I would hope that what we do is we make chief executive and chair appointments where we develop a really good relationship with those people, where they'll want to come and speak with members regularly about what the company's doing. That's ideally where we will be. But you can also then require whoever is representing the council on the board to come and give a regular account of what is happening if you decide that is something you would want to do. So I think there's a couple of mechanisms there that I can think of, just immediately that would enable members to track, how this is working in practice.
Yes, absolutely. I'd agree, Cam, with everything you said. There'll also be avenues, obviously, within scrutiny committees that you can raise certain issues ultimately as part of your consideration on those agendas as well. So there should be numerous forums that will be available at that point.
Yep, thank you very much, Chair. Just on the reserves issue, thank you, Councillor Clement-Williams. Yes, I think we're comfortable that we can cover the risk around £200,000 from reserves. The expectation is that we do recover that from the company. So this is a timing difference, really, because the company isn't set up to trade as yet. And just an assurance that all 4 partners are asking for the same commitment from their relevant decision-making bodies. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, all 3. Next up, I have Councillor Sean Percy, please.
Diolch Cadeirydd, thank you, Chair, and to Karen and David as well for the extra background to the report today. And my apologies to you as well, Chair, for missing the pre-briefing yesterday. But I'll pick up first on the sort of internal governance decision-making sort of point we're having now. I guess, with my committee chair hat on of Regen, I kind of wondering where this is going to sit down the line. Obviously, it's in cabinet scrutiny today. I just wonder whether we've had a bit of a thought. It is quite a far-reaching, significant project, but obviously it'd be interesting for us as members to kind of get an understanding how that might work going forward, for us to sort of plan how we're going to be scrutinising that. I think that would be helpful to know. But I've had some reassurance on some of my other questions just from the background that you provided. In addition to that, I guess the only other thing I've a specific question, sorry, on business rate retention, and I don't know whether this is something that has been worked out, but is that conditional in terms of being ring fenced in any way once that money comes to the local authority, or does that just become an extra income source for the council as a sort of general fund? And then sort of on a similar vein, I guess the other question that's been that I've been thinking about is the sort of wider community benefits. And I appreciate it's quite an early stage, but it's probably the time to consider what position we might want to take. This is going to be quite a significant proposal if it's realised to its full potential, with actually a lot of benefits for private businesses as well as the local economy. And I'm just wondering, are we thinking, or have we explored a community benefits scheme or something that could sit alongside that business rate retention, which is obviously going to be great, but is there more we can get out of this for the community when there's going to be such a large amount of wealth generated from the scheme? And I just think now is the time to think about that and and explore it really. Diolch yn fawr, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Percy. I'll bring Karen back in, please.
I try and see if I can remember now what you asked me there, Councillor Percy. Yeah, so Freeport policy at the moment sits firmly within the regeneration portfolio as the cabinet portfolio holder. For the regen portfolio has Freeport policy in that portfolio. So I think, you know, if your committee wanted to take the lead in scrutinising it going forward, that would make a lot of sense, wouldn't it? So hopefully that kind of answers that one. On business rates retention, David may want to come in and comment after I've just say a couple of things about it. First of all, we haven't had guidance yet from the UK and the Welsh governments around their expectations of what we need to be demonstrating in the outline business case and the full business case. We've been told to look at the Scottish model at the moment, so the Welsh version of the guidance is unlikely to be materially different from the Scottish guidance, but we would expect that to be then setting out what the objectives would be around the use of the retained business rates, because our business our bid was estimating that it could be as much as £0.5 billion over the life of the programme. So that's obviously a very substantial amount of public money, and there'll be expectations that that's used to deliver on the policy objectives. So if I just pause there, David, is there anything further you want to say around that particular point? And I don't know whether who wants to come in as well.
Thank you, Karen. Yes, that's right. The policy very much in England and Scotland is that the OBC and the FBC will need to show how the business rates generated are used to support this policy. So they are ring-fenced for the policy, subject to the arrangements that we will propose as part of the OBC and FBC. What they expressly aren't is to be commingled, for want of a better term, with other council funds that are not a extra source of revenue. It's my understanding. But certainly, as what we're going to be doing within the business case is we're starting to develop the ideas and the plans for how, particularly the processes around how those rates will be spent. In terms of community benefits schemes, I don't know if this is directly an answer to your question, but one of the things that we would be seeking to do within the tax site delivery agreements is look to work to make sure we're getting the right types of commitments out of companies to how they're going to support wider initiatives across the community. So, you know, you might well expect to see them, you know, contributing towards training courses or other things. It's difficult to be precise about that because it'll depend partly on a negotiation in the future about what those companies are able, willing or appropriate to be able to do. Clearly, if you've got somebody investing in a several £100 million factory to, you know, build massive components for a windshore farm, you know, what the expectations on them might be completely different to somebody who's occupying a comparatively small business unit at one of the other portions of the tax site.
And just to add on the same point as well, obviously up until now we've concentrated on putting the bid in and then promoting the bid to get support for it. The next stage is a very intensive piece of work to get this outline business case and then the full business case in place. And as part of that, there'll be a lot of work to establish the company and the governance arrangements. So that's what we're going to be very focused on in the immediate future. However, alongside that, the wider economic benefits that we want to drive from this is something that we've started talking about and started talking to partners about as well. So Nicola may want to come in, but clearly what we are hoping is that we'll be able to get the supply chain ready locally and regionally to maximise the amount of benefit that we can develop from any investment that comes in terms of jobs and all the rest of it. But we've also been starting to talk as well, and I think you were actually in the roundtable meeting when Jeremy chaired that for us, but very much around skills and training and where's the pipeline of the workforce going to come from. It doesn't take you very long then to realise, well, if you're going to create more jobs and you're going to be able to get people locally with the skills to be able to take advantage of those jobs, We need people to live here as well. So we need people to be living here and spending their money here. So there's a challenge there then around housing. And as you know from other discussions, because we're looking at the review of the local development plan at the moment, we really do need to be getting our heads around where these houses are going to be built. And then it's not a far distance to travel then to start thinking, well, how does transport, and that transport network factor into all of that as well? So very, very quickly, because the scale of not just this, but some of the other developments we've got in the area as well, it becomes a much bigger strategic regeneration proposition. So what I would say around all of that is we are not going to deliver on that by doing more of the same. We are going to have to change our approach to the way in which we engage with this agenda, something I've been talking to Nicola about for a little while. I talked to her management team last week. So we will be bringing forward proposals over the coming months to look at how do we make sure we're positioning ourselves to do the things that we need to do locally. And I'm also talking to Welsh Government as well about some of the things that government needs to be prepared to do, because the floating offshore wind proposition, the wider renewable energy sector, is a matter of national significance. It's a massive national security issue, isn't it? Without the sort of decarbonisation, policy objectives in the middle of it all. So I think there's a piece of work, that we've got to get to the end of working out, well, what do we need to be doing locally? What do we do regionally? And then what do we actually need to be getting government to do as well? Because we are not going to be able to do all of this, as I say, by doing more of the same or trying to do it all on our own either.
Thank you, Karen. Nicola, would you like to come in? Thank you.
Yeah, not wishing to repeat what Karen has already indicated. All the issues that we deal with regularly within this authority in terms of housing, transport infrastructure, economic infrastructure, they're all very tightly knitted together. And I think that's very important as part of the Freeport, because what we want to create is sustainable jobs. And what we also want is to ensure that those well-paid job holders, or the people who have those jobs, live and spend their money in Neath Talbot, because what we don't want is for them to live elsewhere, coming, do a job, and then return to another place where they spend their money and invest in those local economies. So we need to create that sustainable environment within Neath Talbot, which sort of reinforces the position Karen indicated in terms of investing in infrastructure, including housing land. What do we need to do to try and bring that land forward? So it's a bit of a tenuous link at the moment with Freeport, and we'll have to sort of wait until we have the further details from the Welsh Government and UK Government. But what we can do, and what we've already started to do, is to look at mapping out our existing businesses within Neath Talbot. What are our existing businesses making, or what services are they delivering, and how can they contribute towards the evolving economy? Do they need a little bit of help in terms of diversifying their outputs? So that we can maximise the benefits for the local economy. So that is also something that we are working on as part of this Freeport bid.
Thank you, Nicola. Councillor Percy, would you like to respond?
Yeah, briefly, Chair. Thank you, and thanks everyone for the responses. It's been interesting actually in terms of the business rates point of view to get maybe a little bit of clarity on that, but I guess there's still a lot to unpick, I suppose. Though if that is ring fenced to a degree for economic development and that agenda, there's going to be a lot to do in that arena to support this. So that makes a lot of sense. But I think it does create there's some risk around ensuring there is community benefit beyond the job creation, which in itself, as we've acknowledged, depending on the timing and the delivery of housing, could go out of county and out of the area as well. And I think that's comes back to my point around a community benefit scheme or something where actually we can nail down and guarantee some income that is going to come to the authority that can support maybe some of those other areas that we'll need to do to support the communities and bring them along with us. And I'm thinking, with my ward hat on as a member for Sandfields East, just across from the port, that we currently don't benefit from a wind farm fund or any sort of funding like that. Some of the Valleys communities have significant pots of money from projects that are significantly smaller than this proposed Freeport. So I do think we need to be quite ambitious and and actually take advantage of the fact we'll be in quite a strong position in terms of our negotiating position with some of these companies, because we will have a really strong offer. And I think that's some part of the point I want to articulate, is let's make sure we grasp all those opportunities for all parts of the community. Even if you've got somebody already working in another job in another sector, can we improve their community? Can we improve the opportunities in the community? And I think that's just something I want to make sure we are thinking about from now onwards. I appreciate some of that may fall into place later, but thanks everyone.
Thank you, Councillor Percy. Next, who's shown an indication to ask a question, Councillor Sonia Reynolds, please.
Thank you, Chair. One of the things that comes up following that long discussion, it's something that I was saving for future discussions on this, but actually it seems to fit better now. And that is, we're talking about housing, we're talking about bringing workers and skills in. We have a build up to this. We have business plans to write, we have some time. Are we already talking to the colleges, talking to the providers, looking at the skills locally, looking at our apprenticeships, looking at what we can do to upskill and make available our own population who already live and reside in the area? Thank you.
Thank you. Bringing Karen back in here, please.
The short answer, Councillor Reynolds, is yes. We convened a skills roundtable meeting going back about 2 months ago, I think it was, where we brought all of the colleges of FE and the universities and the directors of education together from across the region with some of the developers to just have a roundtable conversation about what the skills and training requirement is likely to look like. And we had somebody from the east of England there as well, where they've been supporting floating, not floating offshore wind, but fixed bottom turbines over the other side of the country, just to talk about what their experience had been in trying to service a whole new sector there. So those conversations are starting, and obviously it needs to be bringing in a wider range of stakeholders into that that conversation. I know that Neath College Group are about to go down to visit this college in the east of England. They've been talking to Pembrokeshire College that have done a bit more in this area because they've had Pembroke Dock Marine as part of their City Deal programme. So they've got a number of interesting programmes there that we could probably adapt rather than starting with a blank sheet of paper. But I think there's a lot more to do around that agenda. But yes, just to give you some assurance around that, we started forming a partnership around that, and we'll be working out shortly, I think, who's best placed to lead that piece of work as well.
Thank you, Karen. Councillor Reynolds, would you like to come back in?
No, I knew that someone would be on top of it, given the staff that we've got in the education department and our officers. Thank you very much, Karen.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Looking at the board, we've got Councillor Carol Clement Williams to come back in, please.
Thanks for letting me come back, Chair. It was in response to something that's already been said. Yeah, from what Sonia was asking just now, I did ask during the RLDP meeting around what we're doing with the local colleges, because it was on a separate note really to this, but that we wanted to keep people within the borough, etc., with these jobs. And I did ask if it could be put onto the agenda for scrutiny, but obviously with the year turning now from the last year into this year, so just to check really that will be done, and we do get regular updates on what we're doing with the colleges to ensure that our kids are having the education that they'll need to have some of these very high quality jobs. On the point of the money, is they were never going to let us keep 5 billion, Sean. But Karen, you were saying about doing things differently with government, etc., and perhaps looking at investing some of that money into building housing, which is to sustain the bid or the moving forward then. Because as you know, we can't build houses, or we haven't been able to build houses here in Neath Talbot when the stock went over to other company. So it is something we will need to relook at. And just, it was remiss of me earlier David, to thank you for coming to speak to us today. So thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Right, if we bring Karen back in first then, please.
Just on the housing point, if I may, we've already started talking to housing providers in the area about this development, but also about some of the other developments that we're going to have, hopefully, you know, in the valley areas as well. So they'll all put pressure on local housing, and they're really excited about these proposals. So I think what you'll see over the coming months is the governance structures that we'll be putting in place at the local level will develop, and you'll be able to see much more clearly about who's doing what and how you get to make sure, you know, it's making the difference that we want it to make. But I'll let Andrew come back on the point about the college, if I may.
Thank you, Karen. Andrew Thomas, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to give you the assurances you were looking for, Carol, that those conversations, as Karen said, have started, and regular reports will be taken to the relevant committee to make sure members are kept abreast and of any developments, and obviously to ask questions and scrutinise as we go along.
Chair, can I come back
if you'd like to come back
on that?
yep.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, Andrew, I know it comes to relevant committee, but what I wanted was just sort of, I do whichever vehicle you want to use to do it, but it is something that all members, I believe, would be interested in hearing every now and again. So either as sort of a separate presentation, or even just to point out to councillors not on that education committee when the papers or the information will be coming to that committee, because we try and read all the papers, but nobody in the right mind would be able to read all of them all of the time. So just to remind members that that information will be in there as a result of this discussion now, where it's been asked for, so that we all are able to see that work and what's going on. Thank you.
Yeah, can I come back on that, Chair, please?
Yeah, certainly, Andrew.
Yeah, if it helps, Carol, you know, once a year we can do an all-member seminar as well, so that gives everybody the opportunity to attend and ask questions, as well as the regular updates to members.
I think that would be really beneficial, Andrew. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Are there any other questions at this point then, please? Oh, sorry, Mr. Button then. I can't see anybody else showing any indication to speak. So we'll move on to the recommendation. The recommendation is listed on page 10 and moves on into page 11 as well of the Cabinet Agenda Pack. I'm happy to propose the recommendation. Can I have a seconder, please?
I second, Chair.
Thank you, Jeff. Can members please indicate if they wish to abstain?
I don't see any abstentions, Chair.
Thank you, Charlotte. Members, if you do not indicate to the contrary, then I will take it that this decision is supported to Cabinet.
I don't see anyone against, Chair.
Thank you. That recommendation is backed, okay. Back to agenda item 4, urgent items. You'll be pleased to hear I have no urgent items. As there's no further items, that will end the business for today. Thank you all for attending. Special thanks to David for joining us in the meeting, and those who are here, safe travels home. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Bye everyone. Thanks, David.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all.